joined here today by my colleague, Jackie Chavez, and we're excited to just take this time, talk about what this feels like, and talk through our questions and our experiences with you all today. So we're going to take some time at the beginning to just highlight what this community table about mom guilt is all about. And then we're going to take some time to dive into a conversation with all of you, because today we want to really dive into the pressures and guilt that parents, especially moms, feel. And I want to be honest, the mental health community is complicit in why moms feel so guilty. Freud blamed cold mothers on schizophrenia. Mothers' behaviors and actions have been blamed for a host of different disorders and diagnoses. When accidents or tragedies happen to children, oftentimes we blame ourselves. When their favorite toy goes missing or if they spill punch on their favorite dress, it was us who should have known, who could have jumped in. I appreciate us having this picture of mom guilt might shift and change depending on how old our kids are, depending on their gender, depending on our family and cultural expectations. I know, Jackie, that's definitely something that we both have dealt with and worked with the clients that we've talked to. So let's jump into this. It does not matter why you're parenting solo. It doesn't matter even if it is a father. The aspect of being the mom, the responsibility often lies there, the blame of why things are happening, why this is going on in a kid. We see this a lot because the responsibility physically is there for moms. So I do think that's a really key thing. And we do socially see that the weight, the responsibility, the assumption that this is probably because something you did, didn't do, should have done, should have caught. And I think that weight hits single moms a lot heavier in ways that I think society isn't always aware of. And I think there's a lot of the things that are coming up in the Slido that are really really reflecting some of those other pieces. I love how someone wrote, Jackie here and everyone, what aren't moms blamed for? Right? Like I think there's I like the nodding heads there. Like, what aren't moms getting labeled for there? I think we're blamed for genetic conditions, things that are happening developmentally for our kids. There's a lot of like, did I do this? Is it something that I did prenatally that caused this for my kids?
Yeah, we want to be caring and nurturing and there for our children. And at the same time, we want to model or even just thinking of the financial responsibilities that we may have as moms to have a job as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a sense of like, I'm not doing enough for my kids because I'm not staying at home. And also for moms that do stay at home, all the labor that they're putting in that just gets discounted. And then when their kids are having behavioral issues or other issues, didn't you see that? Didn't you know they were going to make that choice? Um, I love to just nutrition. What are they eating? What what's happening in their bodies? Like all these pieces, criminal acts. I think there's something really key in why we wanted to ask this question. That's a lot of weight that moms are carrying. There's a lot of weight that I don't think we're always aware of that we take responsibility for. There's a generation of people behind me, and we are building something. And I am trying to help my children have the best, have opportunities to thrive because that has or has not been given to me, but now people see me here and that means something. And I think across lots of cultures, we see that. I see that in my culture, in South Asian culture. We were just on another call with API communities talking about like the guilt we feel when we see all the sacrifices our families have made and the pressure that it puts on us. I think as a mom, when I think about that sometimes, I also think about how much modeling shapes our children. And there is an aspect of pushing and hustling and looking like everything that is easy does not always set our kids up for success because we're sitting here on a call talking about how crazy hard it is to juggle everything. And how do we create space to add our care in a way that models for them that it's okay to recognize that there's a lot going on and care for ourselves in a way that doesn't make us feel like we're dropping down a level. Because I think for some of us, stopping, refueling, resting has almost felt like giving up or like not achieving our potential versus like, I'm refueling myself because I'm going to keep building. And I don't know if that hits exactly what you're saying, but I do think there is all this extra pressure to maintain. And I really feel like I am working on reframing that, like the rest that I'm putting into my family, ooh, this is hard. So we all going to do nothing this weekend and we're going to rest and rejuvenate. I've actually seen that in my kids, like the pleasure that they are getting to have a day of nothing and like just highlighting, like, we've had a really busy week. And so we're just going to name what was really busy and how that affected us. What's the things, and it's not nothing. What are just the things that we're going to do in this really quiet day? People have traditions of Sabbath or reflection, and that can be really healthy. And sometimes they just read or draw or lay around. I sometimes really need that. And it's nice to see that my kids actually need it. Boredom's also good for them too. I don't know, Jackie, what sticks out for you with that?
Yeah, I think I'm reading here in the comments. So the notion of sacrifice is not well understood. And I think what comes to mind for me is like, I think for some of us, we're breaking those generational patterns of like what our moms or our grandmothers have done. And like learning that, rest or talking about this or navigating it differently feels different. And it's also okay because we're modeling that to our children as well. Um, it's not an easy thing to do, but I do think that it is very necessary.
Mhm. Jackie, there's a question in the Q&A that just came up, which was, how do I deal with other moms judging me and my choices?
Yeah, that's a really hard one. And I think I always go back to this idea of I think everyone's on their own journey. Everyone has like their own nervous system. Like everyone is at their own space. And so we need to respect that for ourselves as it comes to things. So if our colleagues, friends, whatever we may call them, are sending their kids to all these activities or baking all of these things, I think
Mhm.
that's great for them. But then it's also thinking about how do we respect ourselves and acknowledge like the hard work that we have put in. And so I think being a mom also means we're not going to show up as 100% every day. Maybe there's a day here and there we are able to do that, but sometimes we're showing up at 75%, 50%, 30%, whatever that may look like. And I think acknowledging that you are just showing up and doing the best that you can, um, however that will look like, and knowing that no one can show up as 100% in their life. So the moms that are saying they're doing all these things, I'm sure they have bad days too, and they may not just be acknowledging that to us.
Yeah, I would also say too, like we don't have to be 100% on our choices either, because sometimes I feel like I got to be so confident about what I decided to do with my kids, and then I can like withstand the judgment that comes my way. Um, because I think I think people judge us on a regular basis for a whole lot of things and we just can't control it. But I think the times that it really hits us are the things that we actually are judging ourselves about or we're struggling with. Like I struggle to make decisions for my kids on a lot of things because I just don't know what's right. Like, I just don't know if it's right that I let my kid not do this thing, or I let them quit this thing, or I let them wear that in public. I don't know. I don't know if it was okay. So when I see another parent judging them or judging me, I might have a moment of insecurity. And I think it's okay to say, like, I wasn't certain I am doing my best. I had a reason for letting something happen. Um, and I think it's okay to be gracious with ourselves in those moments because we are trying to do the best for our families. And I love how you said, Jackie, we're allowed to have an off day. Um, our kids will recover when we make a mistake. And then we get to show them how you apologize. We get to show them how you repair something because someone else is going to make a mistake in the future for them. Um, I think we really try to be superheroes, and that's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. And I think kids can learn a lot um, by making mistakes. I hate it, but it's like, okay, there's a really good way for us to like show them how we can fix something when it didn't work out. And there's this great researcher, because we had Freud and we had a bunch of other researchers talking about all these horrible things that moms are doing to their kids, causing all these mental health issues. His name was Winnicott, and he talked about the good enough mother. And the idea that like the good enough mother is the mother who lets the kid cry, like the kid's crying, but the mom is going to eventually show up and care for the kid. That frustration tolerance is actually a really important thing for kids to develop. So it's not like mom's ignoring the baby. Mom might be doing something else, preparing something, but mom is going to respond. And so being a perfect mother might actually be harmful for children because they never build the skill of knowing that like help is coming. I can hold through this pain until help is there. And so sometimes when we say, I feel like I'm not enough, sometimes we forget maybe it's actually good that we're not enough because our kids are developing the skills that they might need. And other times we're not enough because we need other people. Like, I love how someone on the call here today has a 6-month-old. It'd be really problematic if that 6-month-old never cried, never made noise. Even children that are mute will do something to communicate that there's a need. Um, but it's hard for parents whose kids don't communicate because we need help. But also, it is really important when you have response. And we learn if you don't get a response, you stop asking for help. Knowing that people are there is really important. And there's always that balance that we're trying to seek for people to be able to build up that resilience. And some of us, we've been in situations where, like, yeah, that was really tough. I wish I got saved from that. That's okay. We can still grow through those things. But yeah, there's a place of like how to hold that balance of where we can grow, where our kids can take risks, that we don't have to carry the burden that we couldn't save them from something, but that we could support them through it.
I think a lot of this is also easier said than done. Logistically, it makes a lot of sense. So, like, as moms, like, how do we deal with that when it's like, okay, yeah, we need to let them be upset for a little bit because there's going to be even things as moms that we can't show up for them. So, how do we deal with those emotions? How do we sit with that?
Oh, that's a great question, Jackie. Um, I would say we gotta build up our frustration tolerance too. Um, I think back to sleep training with my oldest. I have crazy insomnia. I always have. I've done all the things. If you're having insomnia, CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, it works really well. It did not necessarily help me with my insomnia. And I was like, I'm going to sleep. I'm going to get my kids to sleep really well. I do not want them to struggle with this. That is my goal. I'm going to do this. And so I read all the books, I read all the things, all the different techniques. It was the most painful thing to be in another room and just hear him cry. And my older one was very social. So separating from him, he's like, no, 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 I'm gonna scream, 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 scream. And I just sat there and listened to that crying until I got like I couldn't make it some nights. Um, and I think you sometimes just cry through it. Um, you shift gears sometimes. I was very unsuccessful for a very long time. Um, I think some of the stuff that really helps me is looking back at what are the hard things that I have gone through with support that has helped me be successful, and knowing that that's part of what I want for my kids. Um, so there are things I protect them from, and other times watching them be really proud of themselves when they figure something out. Like if I can think of the outcome I want them to get to, which is why I'm doing this, that can be really helpful too. How often are we patting ourselves on the back for the things that went really well for our kids? Because we'll take all the guilt, we'll take all the not enough. I don't know how often we're taking the like, yes, that A plus, yes, that goal they scored. Look at that beautiful picture they made out of macaroni. Are we taking that? No, that's theirs. That's what our kid did. We're so proud of them, right? There's also this beautiful thing that you said about developmental process. We forget that we too are in a developmental process. Like no kid comes with a manual. And there's lots of books out there, but no one wrote a book on your kid and no one wrote a book on you and how you're going to be a mom and how you're going to relate to this person. And I think I find that really real. Like I had a kid and then I had another, and the other one was very different. And being a mom to that kid is different. And so we didn't have a manual on that. And so some of you are parents of multiple kids. It's you have some insight from parenting the earlier ones, but it's new and it's different. I think also when you have adopted kids or kids who joined your life later through other ways from other types of family systems, it's a different thing and you're going to grow with them. Um, I also think about someone you have a really good close connection with, because not all of us have that with our parents or our caregivers. And if it was when you were young, think about how many times you told them you hated them and how many times you were mad at them and how many times you actually meant it. Um, because oftentimes we say those things and we feel those things and we're very frustrated at the people who really helped us grow. And that is a helpful thing to remember when we're trying to do the hard thing for our kids and they are not having a good response to us, is that that is a normal part of this relationship and this development. But it does not feel good on this end to do that. And so we got to seek that feeling good in other places. I said a lot, Jackie. I don't know if there's other things there. There's probably a ton of amazing comments that have come through the chat and through the Q&A. Um, and I think that hits even for parents of older children when you're feeling that push and pull. I also think even when they're not biologically yours, attachment is really powerful. Um, and we are strongly attached to the children we are caring for. And so we're going to feel that push and pull very often. We have an, I'm going to go through one of the questions from the Slido Q&A. So we talk about, okay, external expectations make us feel some type of way. I wonder if there is an internal thinking framework that we could adopt that could change, that I'm in control of. How do you begin to craft that mental framework for yourself? I really, I really love that because, Jackie, I feel like that kind of ties into some of the skills that we wanted to talk people through. Um, because I do think some of the work is really, really hard for most of us. Um, which is kind of hard. We're talking about mom guilt, and we're like, here's all the things you need to do, moms. Do all these things, think all these things, act all these ways. Um, I think that there's a big theme of how do we give ourselves more grace and how do we build an internal framework that allows us to be human, um, and to recognize that part of who we are. I'm going to share my screen really quickly because part of as Jackie and I were
Yeah. I think something I would say is like thinking about the way that you want to feel as a person. I know being a mom is a big part of our identities, but also just outside of that too, because we do have other identities as well. So does it mean just being more mindful of, I noticed that I've been putting myself down a lot or been just really self-critical. Like, are there things that I can say to myself throughout the day that would be supportive for myself? Because then that makes me feel good. And then that way I am able to show up for my children as well. So,
I love that, Jackie, because I think sometimes when you get into mom mode, you completely forget about all the other parts of who you are. Um, and I think zooming out to think about how do I want to feel right now? Who do I want to be? Who are all the other people I am? Is such a great way of like not just being like, who is mom? How do I act this way? But just this is who I am as a person. I really love how holistic that is. We have one more question in the Q&A, and I think we have time to go through it. So this question is, would you have any tips on how to ease your mom guilt that's embedded deeply in you and feels very real, no matter how much you tell yourself that what I thought was best at that time? So when that guilt is deeply rooted and you're telling yourself that it was right, that what I did and what I thought was best, but it's still stuck.
yeah, that's a tough one. I'm thinking about just like reconnecting with your values as a person, trying to find ways to ground yourself I think it relates to what I had just mentioned too, of like, how do I want to feel? How do I want to be perceived in this world? But I think it's like a great first step that we have that awareness about ourselves, that this is just like a really deep issue for us, that it sounds like we are trying to think about ways to change for ourselves.
Yeah, I really love how you're recognizing like this is deeply embedded. I am trying to do things different, but it's still stuck. Um, Absolutely. I really, when you're talking, it's the metaphor of like the plant is still growing and there may be rocks in the soil, but the roots can find a way around it if you're still watering it and keeping it in the sun. And so there are times where like I did what I thought was best and it didn't work out. And this is a challenge. You can name the truth. I love what Christine put in the chat there that we're challenging some of our personal core beliefs and some of the nasty, hard things that we think about ourselves that we struggle with. And that's why guilt doesn't disappear. That's why Jackie is like, we got to get into our values. But being a parent brings up our own stuff. We got to deal with some of that. And sometimes like, I don't want to deal with it, but now I have this person that I'm trying to raise. And so these things can still shift in the things that help our children grow, and we can still pour good things in them. And I love what Maria put in the chat, connecting with other moms, because right there, that question, a bunch of people just dropped things in there. They had a bunch of things to say about it because this is something a lot of us struggle with. These guilty thoughts are sticky. This is why we have a community table conversation on mom guilt because we didn't just solve it. We're not all leaving with the guilt is gone, but we're naming that as something that we feel that we don't have to carry by ourselves. This is something that we can recognize exists in culture and that we can give each other grace, that we can release some of that and look at the great things and the great humans that we are trying to support and build. So I really appreciate the comments in the chat, the conversation. Um, that's why we host these conversations. We want to help facilitate time and space for people to be able to gather, to discuss, to hopefully be able to learn things but learn them from one another.